Go ahead and open your first step book that looks like this. We're going to turn to page 5. Go ahead and turn to page 5. This is what page 5 looks like in your first step book. And right now we are going to be looking at number 4. It says reading by interval, seconds, and fingering. So page 5, number 4. So here's number 4, and today we're going to be reading the bottom line, or the F-clef line of the intervals of seconds. We've talked quite a bit about intervals in the preliminary lessons, but let's review a little bit of what we know already about intervals. First of all, intervals of seconds are next door sounds. So they go up by step, or up by seconds, or down by step, or down by seconds. So let's listen. Here's a few intervals of seconds going up. And here are a few intervals of seconds going down on the keyboard. We have also learned that when we play intervals of seconds, we use next door fingers. So for example, if we're using our left hand and we start with our thumb on one note and we're playing an interval of a second down, we would use the next closest finger, which would be this, our pointer finger. And with our right hand, let's say that we're starting with a middle finger on a note and we're playing up an interval of a second, we would play the next finger up. So we would use our ring finger. So with intervals of seconds, we always use next door fingers. We also know that intervals of seconds are played with next door letters. So in front of you, you see the letters that we use as the names of the sounds on the piano. And whenever we're playing intervals of seconds, we're always using next door letters. So if we play a C and we want to play down an interval of a second, we would play the letter next door to C, which would be B. Or if we're going up in intervals of seconds and we play C, we would go up to the next door letter, or we would play a D. And finally, we know that intervals of seconds come with next door keys on the piano. So if we're playing an interval of a second, and we're starting on middle C right here, and we're going up by seconds, the next key we would play, or the next sound, would be D. Or if we're going up another interval of a second, we would play the sound E. So here we are back at page 4. And before we play this exercise, this line of F-clef notes of intervals of seconds, let's talk about this little tiny number 3 that sits right above the first note. You can see it right there by the blue arrow. And we learned when we did our G-clef interval exercise that this is what we call a fingering. So this is a helpful little number that tells us which finger we use on that note. Here is a picture of 2 hands, and our thumbs are number 1s. Then our next fingers, or our pointer fingers, are number 2. The next ones are number 3. The next finger is number 4. And the next finger is number 5. So here we are back on page 4. And you've likely concluded that that little tiny 3 above the first note means that the third finger of our left hand starts on that note. We also saw that the third finger of our left hand is also the middle finger of our left hand. And that little fingering, while helpful, is also quite important to the success of playing this little line of notes. So before we get ready to try to play this, let's make sure we have that first note figured out correctly. And maybe you know it right away, and that's great. If not, let's figure out what it is. So first of all, let's go back to our F clef line. Our F clef line is pretty easy to figure out these days. It's the line that runs through the large dot of the F clef. It's very helpful to us because it reminds us where the F line always is. And we see that that note, the very first note in the bass clef or F clef exercise, is the interval of a second below the F clef line. So let's take a look at a piano keyboard here. And let's find the F clef line on the keyboard, or the note that would fall on that line. And we know that it's the F below middle C. And then if we go down the interval of a second, we can see that the first note in this exercise is E. So we would place the third finger of our left hand on E. And then we slowly look at one note after the next note and determine if the note goes up or down. Since we know these are all intervals of seconds, we use our next door fingers to go up or down on our next door notes. So at this time, I want you to take your book and go to your piano, take a few minutes, and do your absolute best to play through this interval exercise. Is this what it sounded like when you played your intervals of seconds?